Somewhere between the ages of 60 and 65, something quiet begins to happen inside your body, something almost nobody warns you about, something your doctor rushes past in a 15-minute appointment squeezed between two other patients. Your muscles slowly start losing their ability to listen, not to walking, not to vitamins, not to the multivitamin your daughter keeps buying you, but to protein itself, the very raw material your body needs every single day to repair, rebuild, and stay alive in the truest sense of that word. And here is the strange part, the part that changed the way I think about aging completely. Researchers following thousands of older adults for years found something almost nobody talks about, that people who ate one specific protein source every single morning, not at dinner, not as a snack before bed, but first thing in the morning, kept walking, kept climbing stairs, kept living independently decades longer than people eating the exact same amount of protein at the wrong time of day. Before I tell you exactly which protein this is and why the timing matters this much, I want to ask you a small favor. Hit that subscribe button here on Smart Psychology, because we cover research like this almost every week, the kind of research that quietly changes how long you live and how well you live, and I do not want you missing the next one. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, because to understand why this one protein matters so much, you first have to understand what is actually happening inside your body as you age, and almost nobody explains this properly. Every cell in your body is in a constant state of destruction and rebuilding, all day, every day, whether you notice it or not. Your muscles, your skin, your organs, even your bones, they are being broken down and rebuilt continuously, a process your body has been running since before you were born. In your 20s and 30s, this process runs smoothly, almost automatically. Your body takes the protein you eat, breaks it into amino acids, and uses those amino acids to rebuild tissue faster than it breaks down. But somewhere around your late 40s and 50s, something shifts quietly, without announcing itself. Your muscles become less responsive to protein. Scientists call this anabolic resistance, and it is one of the least talked about, most consequential changes that happens as you age. It means the exact same meal, the exact same amount of protein that used to build muscle easily in your 30s, now barely moves the needle in your 60s, unless you change how and when you eat it. This is why so many people over 65 eat what looks like a perfectly reasonable diet, plenty of protein spread across the day, chicken at lunch, fish at dinner, and still lose muscle mass year after year, still get weaker, still get frailer, still end up needing help getting out of a chair. It is not that they are eating badly. It is that their bodies have become harder to convince, and convincing an aging body to hold on to its muscle requires a very specific kind of signal, delivered at a very specific time, and most people are sending that signal at exactly the wrong moment. So let me finally tell you what this one protein is, because I promised you I would, and I am not going to make you wait any longer than I already have. It is the humble egg. Not a supplement, not a powder, not something you need to order online, just the egg, sitting quietly in your refrigerator right now, probably ignored, probably underestimated, possibly even avoided, because someone told you decades ago it would raise your cholesterol, advice that most modern research has since walked back almost entirely. The egg is what nutrition scientists call a complete protein, meaning it contains all 9 essential amino acids your body cannot produce on its own, in almost the exact ratio your muscles need to rebuild themselves. But that alone does not explain why eating it in the morning specifically matters so much. And this is where it gets genuinely fascinating. Inside that egg is an amino acid called leucine, and leucine is not just another building block, it is closer to a switch. When leucine enters your bloodstream in high enough concentration, it activates a pathway in your muscle cells called mTOR, which is essentially the ignition switch for something called muscle protein synthesis, the process your body uses to build new muscle tissue. Eggs happen to be unusually rich in leucine, relative to their total protein content, richer than most people realize, which means a modest serving of eggs can trigger this switch far more effectively than an equivalent amount of protein from many other sources. Now here is where the timing becomes everything. Overnight, while you sleep, your body has gone 8, 9, sometimes 10 hours without any protein at all. During that stretch, your body has been quietly breaking down muscle tissue for fuel, especially in older adults, because an aging body defaults to breaking down muscle faster than a younger one does. By the time you wake up, your muscles are sitting in what researchers sometimes describe as a mildly catabolic state, meaning breakdown is slightly ahead of rebuilding. This is the exact moment your body is most sensitive, most responsive, most primed to receive that leucine signal and flip the switch toward rebuilding instead of breaking down. Eat that same protein at dinner instead, after a full day of eating, and the effect is real but blunted. Your body is not nearly as hungry for the signal. Eat it first thing in the morning, on a body that has been fasting all night, and the response is dramatically stronger. This is not a small detail. This is the entire reason timing changes the outcome so much, and it is the piece almost nobody explains when they tell you to simply eat more protein as you get older. Let me tell you about a woman I will call Linda, because I think her story makes this real in a way numbers alone cannot. Linda was 63 when her doctor mentioned, almost in passing, that her muscle mass was lower than it should be for her age. She had always eaten what she considered a healthy diet: oatmeal in the morning, a salad for lunch, chicken and vegetables for dinner, plenty of protein overall by any standard measure. But she started noticing small things. Jars she used to open easily now needed her husband. Stairs that used to feel effortless now left her slightly winded. A general sense that her body was quietly shrinking away from her, even though the scale barely moved. She started eating 3 whole eggs every single morning instead of oatmeal. Nothing fancy, scrambled most days, boiled when she was in a hurry, alongside her usual lunch and dinner exactly as before. Within a month, she noticed she was opening those jars again without asking for help. Within 3 months, her grip strength, measured at a routine checkup, had improved enough that her doctor asked what she had changed. Within 6 months, she was climbing 2 flights of stairs to her apartment without stopping to catch her breath halfway up, something she had quietly stopped being able to do 2 years earlier without even noticing when it happened. Linda did not start lifting weights. She did not join a gym. She did not overhaul her entire diet. She simply moved her protein earlier in the day and made sure it came from a source rich enough in leucine to actually trigger the response her aging body needed. Now, I want to be honest with you about something, because I think you deserve honesty rather than hype. This is not magic, and I am not telling you that eating eggs alone will guarantee you 30 extra years of life. What the research actually shows is something both more modest and more remarkable at the same time: that consistent morning protein intake, particularly from leucine-rich complete proteins like eggs, is strongly associated with preserved muscle mass, preserved strength and preserved independence well into old age, and muscle mass itself turns out to be one of the single strongest predictors of how long you live and how well you live during those years. Studies following older adults have repeatedly found that low muscle mass, a condition called sarcopenia, predicts hospitalization, falls, loss of independence, and earlier death far more reliably than almost any other single measurement doctors routinely check. Preserve the muscle, and you preserve far more than strength. You preserve your ability to stay in your own home, to carry your own groceries, to pick up your own grandchildren, to remain, in every meaningful sense, yourself. There is another layer to this that almost nobody mentions, and it has to do with your hormones first thing in the morning. Cortisol, the hormone most people only associate with stress, naturally peaks shortly after you wake up as part of a completely normal daily rhythm your body has run since before recorded history. Cortisol on its own tends to push your body slightly toward breaking down tissue for energy, which sounds alarming until you understand what happens next. Feed your body a strong dose of leucine-rich protein right into that window, and you essentially counteract that morning breakdown signal with an equally strong rebuilding signal, turning what could be a quietly catabolic morning into a powerfully anabolic one instead. Skip breakfast, or eat something low in protein like cereal or toast alone, and cortisol wins that particular battle almost by default, day after day, for years, without you ever noticing the slow toll it takes. Insulin sensitivity follows a similar pattern. Most people are more insulin sensitive in the morning than at any other point in the day, meaning your body handles nutrients, including amino acids, more efficiently earlier rather than later. This is part of why the exact same plate of food tends to produce a different metabolic response, depending on whether you eat it at 7 in the morning or 9 at night. Pair that natural morning insulin sensitivity with a leucine spike from eggs, and you get a kind of biological alignment, 2 separate systems in your body working in the same direction at the same time, rather than fighting each other. This is precisely the kind of detail researchers studying meal timing keep uncovering, and it is precisely the kind of detail that almost never makes it into a basic eat more protein recommendation. I also want to address something people frequently ask me, which is whether a protein bar or a protein shake in the morning accomplishes the exact same thing. In many cases it genuinely can, provided it actually contains enough leucine and complete amino acids. But here is the catch. Many popular protein bars marketed toward older adults are surprisingly low in real protein, once you read the label carefully, padded out with fiber, sugar alcohol, and marketing language rather than actual usable amino acids. A real egg cannot lie to you the way a label sometimes can. 3 eggs reliably deliver the same 18 to 21 grams of high-quality, leucine-rich protein every single time, with no hidden fillers and no fine print, which is part of why whole food sources like eggs remain such a dependable foundation compared to relying on packaged alternatives alone. This is a good moment to pause and ask you to do something small right now, before you keep scrolling to something else. If this is resonating with you even a little, tap that like button, because it genuinely helps this reach more people who need to hear it. And if you know someone over 50 who has started noticing their own body quietly changing, send this to them. Because this is exactly the kind of information that only helps if it actually reaches the people who need it before the muscle loss becomes harder to reverse. Let me get practical now, because knowing this matters far less than actually doing it. The general research points toward roughly 25 to 30 grams of high-quality protein at breakfast, being the threshold where muscle protein synthesis gets meaningfully triggered in an older adult, compared to a much lower threshold needed in someone younger. 3 large eggs provide somewhere around 18 to 21 grams of protein on their own, which is a strong start, but often not quite enough by itself to hit that full threshold. So many people add a slice of whole grain toast, a small serving of Greek yogurt on the side, or a glass of milk to round things out. The eggs do not need to be fancy, scrambled, boiled, poached, or fried in a small amount of olive oil all work. What matters far more than the cooking method is simply making sure they show up on your plate in the morning, consistently, most days of the week, not just occasionally when you happen to remember. For people who genuinely cannot or choose not to eat eggs, the same principle applies to other leucine-rich complete proteins, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, or whey protein shake, or a combination of plant proteins carefully paired together to supply the full amino acid profile, though eggs remain one of the most affordable, accessible, and naturally leucine-dense options available in almost any grocery store in the country. Start where you are. If you currently skip breakfast entirely, which a surprising number of people over 50 do, simply adding 2 eggs is already a meaningful shift. If you already eat breakfast but it leans heavily toward carbohydrates alone, cereal, toast, a bagel, adding eggs alongside, rather than instead of what you already enjoy, is a gentle, sustainable way to build the habit, without turning your morning into a chore. There is a broader piece of this puzzle I also want to share with you, because I find it genuinely fascinating. Muscle tissue is not just tissue that helps you move, it functions almost like an organ in its own right, releasing chemical signals into your bloodstream when it is actively being maintained and rebuilt. These signals influence blood sugar regulation, they influence inflammation throughout your body, and emerging research suggests they even influence brain health and cognitive resilience as you age. This is part of why preserved muscle mass keeps showing up again and again in longevity research as a marker connected not just to physical strength, but to a much broader picture of healthy aging, touching your heart, your metabolism, and even your mind. Bone density tells a similar story, and it is closely tied to everything we have already discussed. Muscle and bone are in constant conversation with each other, pulling and loading against one another every time you move, and that mechanical loading is part of what signals your bones to stay dense rather than gradually thinning, a condition called osteoporosis that quietly affects a huge percentage of adults over 65, especially women. Stronger, better-fed muscle tends to translate into stronger mechanical loading on the skeleton underneath it, which is one more reason researchers keep finding that people who preserve muscle mass into old age also tend to experience fewer fractures, fewer broken hips, and faster recovery when accidents do happen. A broken hip after 75 carries a genuinely sobering statistic, a worse 1-year survival rate than many common cancers, largely